When it's too tough for them, it's just right for us.
Where would you rather be than right here, right now?
The Rockpile Report with Buffalo Bills season ticket holder Drew Gear.
The Bills make me wanna shout.
Busy day in the NFL continues as the Buffalo Bills have announced that former Alabama offensive coordinator Brian Daboll will take over as the offensive coordinator in Buffalo in 2018. Daboll spent the 2017 season with the national champion Crimson Tide, but has NFL coaching experience as well, running the offense in Cleveland for 2 seasons and in Miami and Kansas City for a year apiece.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Rockpile Report podcast. I am your host, Buffalo Bills season ticket holder Drew Gear. To my right is my producer, Chris Kruger, and that was Madeline Bork from SI.com. You see, Madeline, it's not funny when you butcher people's last names, is it? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, she's stupid. Now, let me ask you this. Last night, what the fuck was Marcus Williams doing?
Oh, folks, we have reached championship weekend. Man, what a weekend of great football. Wildcard weekend hit its ups, its downs. Some of the games were snoozers, but I'll tell you, this weekend, well, what I watched of the games was fantastic. Now, I don't know, for those of you who follow us on Twitter at Rockpile Report, you'll all know that I got fed up about, 2 or 3 minutes into the second quarter after that ridiculous call in the New England Patriots game. I know. You're all wondering which one, Drew. Which ridiculous call. I shut the TV off. That was it. It was done. I took Twitter. I said, hey, this sucks. This is absurd, and I should be watching the WWE instead of this. I'm out of here.
But that was actually a blessing in disguise because you shut it off, and I was like, well, all right, well, I took an Uber here, so I tried to Uber, and I didn't like who my driver was going to be, and so I canceled it. And then I got a Lyft, and I got picked up by a woman, and then when she brought me back here, I was unlocking my door, and she yelled from the street, yo, let me get your number.
There you go.
Exactly.
Attaboy, Chris.
I was so drunk, I don't know if I actually gave her my phone number.
Folks, the football was fantastic. I mean, first of all, Jags and Steelers. Now, I overlooked the Jags this weekend, too. So, the Steelers, you're not alone. I mean, the Bills held this team to 10 points and held Blake Bortles to less than 87 yards through the air. And yet at the same time, he completed that inside of the first 2 possessions in the first quarter against the Steelers.
That shows you that we have a defense and Pittsburgh doesn't.
Well, I don't even know that Pittsburgh doesn't. I think that Pittsburgh honestly
that was just game plan?
No, just
from Nathan Hackett?
I think they just
Nathaniel Hackett?
I think they came into this game. I mean, if you remember those first few drives, a lot of their chunk yardage came on throws to tight ends out in the flat. I honestly believe that the Steelers just weren't ready for that.
The best play of that game, the play action touchdown to the fullback.
Yeah,
that was the best play of the game.
I'm telling you, they came out
executed to perfection.
They came out fired up, caught a Steelers team that was kind of sleepwalking to begin the game, and just
by sleepwalking you mean they were looking ahead to New England
and threw the kitchen sink at them. I mean, this was a game that I thought was going to be turned into a blowout one way, and it went the other way. It was 21-0. And that's when I was like, oh, shit.
I didn't think it would be a blowout based on that Jacksonville already kicked their ass in Week 5 in Pittsburgh. I thought they could hang with them, but I thought Pittsburgh would win this time because they got the experience and, AB was back, Le'Veon Bell, Big Ben. I thought they were going to handle them, but I thought it was going to be close. I was surprised that Jacksonville won.
It's just crazy to me. And I think it has more to do with the coaching than anything else. I mean, Kevin Sumlin, Jesus Christ. I'm getting him and, what's his face?
Mike Tomlin.
They almost look the same. They got the same, facial hair, the sunglasses, yelling on the sideline. The clock management, okay, by the Steelers in that game.
Do you onside
some of the
kick
coaching
there?
was, no. And at the same time, some of the coaching, you have, the moment I decided that they didn't deserve to win the game was when it's 4th and 2. Okay, I believe it was 4th and 2. All you need, you're going for it on 4th down. You try to pitch the ball out. Pitch out. Okay. This is one of the better teams in the NFL on defense. Their scoring defense is fantastic. Their linebackers are all penetrators. Their cornerbacks are good run defenders. You try a pitch out and trust your wide receivers to block when all you need is 2 yards. How is it that you can't just lower your heads and find a way to go straight forward for 1.5 yards to 2 yards?
I think I heard on Colin Cowherd today. He said that on like 4th and short, which I would assume is 4th and 1, 4th and 2, when you just let Ben Roethlisberger pick it up.
Fall forward.
When you let Big Ben pick it up, he's like 18 of 19 in the playoffs on 4th and short.
Tom Brady has been doing it to teams for years where he falls forward for 1.5 yards. Why they didn't even decide that was a better idea, I'll never know. But when that play happened, that's the moment that I was like, this game is not going to end well for the Steelers. That's it. Because they're making poor decisions in some of the most clutch moments of this game. I mean, there was a lot of great plays. Don't get me wrong. The Steelers definitely balled out, but they ultimately dug too big of a hole and just didn't have the time to get out of it.
Yeah, if you score 42 points, you should win the goddamn game.
And then on the other side of the ball, the best game of the day, Vikings and Saints. I mean, that game had everything. I mean, good for the Vikings for putting the icing on that cake. You're talking about your kicker misses a field goal, okay? You're up 17-0, and then the other team comes back after halftime and starts coming back, and you can't answer, you're struggling, and they take the lead, and you've got 40 seconds to come back in the game. And you're just trying to get in field goal range. And then Case Keenum throws a walk-off home run. Touchdown pass. It was incredible. That's something that's going to make the highlight reel. I mean, they're going to look back at this season. It's going to be on every highlight reel. It could be one of the best postseason plays of all time.
Yeah, I have no idea what Marcus Williams was doing.
I don't know what that safety's thinking. I mean, I guess I do. In my mind, I think what he's thinking is, hey, I'm going to come barreling in here and I'm going to knock down this wide receiver in the field of play so that the clock expires.
Because Diggs did jump for it.
Yes.
He had to jump for it. So if you're taking out his legs, he's just going to fall flat on his back, inbounds.
Clock's done. I get what he was trying to do.
He just missed completely.
He whiffed completely, took out his own man, and there was nobody there to cover him from behind. And that was it. I mean, you could see it. Even Stephon Diggs was shocked that there was nobody around him. Like, he had to look around to make sure that he wasn't going to get tackled from behind. It was an incredible thing. And the bar that we were watching the game at, there was a couple guys with Vikings jerseys on who just went absolutely berserk when that happened. And I'll tell you what, seeing that gives me this warm and fuzzy feeling inside, because it's like, you know what? That's what football's about. That moment right there. You're a Vikings fan in the city of Buffalo, New York, but you can still get around your team. And when they make that play, it doesn't matter where you are. You're going to wear your fandom on your sleeve. That is fantastic.
Well, I think they'll get to the Super Bowl. I mean, you're going up against Nick Foles, who's nothing to cheer about. But I kind of don't want Minnesota to win the Super Bowl if they get there, because then that would put them 0-5 all time, and we would just be 0-4. So they would be like way worse. But I mean, going back to New Orleans, this is something we should mention. They were 7-9 last season.
Yep.
What were they this year? 11-5. They were 11-5. Think about what they did in the draft. Lattimore in the first, and then they had Marcus Williams in the second, and then Kamara in the third. Just 3 picks were able to turn around their team this year.
Yeah.
Kamara played a huge role in offense because, before they were just relying on Breeze's arm. Now that he's up there in age, you have Kamara.
Well, don't forget about Ken Crawley and guys like that who really, on the Saints defense, really helped their secondary.
But now you're not relying on Breeze's arm anymore.
No.
Because you have Kamara and you have Ingram. Ingram, you use short yardage, goal line situations, 3rd and 1s and whatnot. And then Kamara's just unbelievable out of the backfield pass catching. And so you're not relying on Breeze's arm, and he's not getting a tired arm late in the season. So I think he's going to re-sign. I think he's a free agent. He's going to re-sign in New Orleans anyway. And as long as Drew Brees is the quarterback, they're going to be making the playoffs based on the draft class that they just had. Because you know what? And also to mention of it, they're on rookie deals, so they're not making anything, and they're still going to be able to compete next year.
That's a good point. No, it was a really exciting day of football, and the weekend. I mean, the Eagles-Falcons game was good. That Patriots game, those guys can kiss my ass, but ultimately the football that I did watch this weekend was top-notch, and I'm really excited about it because that means this week's matchups hopefully are just as good. Folks, we're going to get right into things as we always do with this week's Bills News Update. Brian Gain is the new Texans GM. Thanks for coming by for a cup of coffee, Brian. Thanks for stopping in. The Texans have made it official, hiring former assistant coach and former Bills VP of personnel, Gain, as their new general manager. I mean, when you think about it, the move makes a lot of sense. I mean, Gain took the VP job here only after interviewing for the Bills GM position. And it was no secret that his name has come up a lot in terms of GM openings. You know, he's a well-respected member of the NFL community. You know, he's a name out there. So the fact that we landed him as a VP of personnel to begin with was kind of shocking to me in the offseason. And I'm not surprised to see him go.
Well, it was surprising that he even came here because he was with Houston the previous season. And then he came to Buffalo for one, and now he's back in Houston.
Well, I mean, when you think about it, though, when you look at it at face value, he may have been the winner in that deal because he's inheriting a phenomenal situation, which is arguably a better job than the one that he lost out on to Bean. I mean, look at what Houston has going for him. They've got a rich owner who doesn't care about spending money. They've got a head coach who just got a 4-year extension that he's already familiar with. So there's going to be some synergy between coach and GM. They seemingly have found a quarterback of the future in Deshaun Watson.
He had 19 touchdowns in 7 games.
They have a stacked defense. And their division is highly contestable. You know, when you think about it, there is no stud team in that division.
Yeah. You wonder what Tennessee's going to do with the head coach now because they need a new head coach. And then you don't know what Luck's going to be like with his shoulder injury.
Well, exactly. So it's a division that's open. You know what I mean? You can't count on the Jaguars. You know, the Jaguars aren't the Patriots. They're not going to sit on top of that division for a decade.
Can they sustain what they did this season?
Exactly. And so I think that it's, you know, and you think about it, everyone says, oh, well, they're 11-5 record, 11-5. Okay, well, that 11-5 record also includes wins over a Jacoby Brissett-led Colts team and wins over a Tom Savage-led Houston team.
Yep.
So really, you haven't seen either one of these teams at their peak. And if so, it's going to be a competitive division, but I think one that Houston, with health notwithstanding, is going to be right in the mix for. So good luck to him. I mean, he's going to be taking the reins of an organization that is set up for success. If they can just find some in-season consistency, it's going to bode well for him long term. And we here at the Rockpile Report wish him the best of luck. Cheers. Now, having said that, Gain is not the only person leaving town. Hey, Rick Dennison, I've got a message for you.
Yeah!
Folks, no one individual, okay, in the history of this podcast has ended up as zero of the week as many times in a single season as Rick Dennison did this year. I have berated him ever since the Denver game, which we won.
Wrong. Carolina. Week two.
Chris, see, this is why I'm glad I have you around to chronicle my ravings. Just alcohol-fueled football ravings. In games like the New England games, I've actually wished that he would get kidnapped by Mexican drug lords and held for ransom during the halftime intermission. Okay?
He ain't worth anything.
His play calling was high school at best. Often maddening. You run when you should pass. You pass when you don't have a single route constructed to actually make it to the first down marker. His love affair with Mike Tolbert that makes me think that he should have bought a Valentine's Day card and preemptively stuffed it in the guy's locker.
What did Greg said last weekend? Like, it seemed like he believed like you had to use all 3 downs to get the first down.
Oh my God. It was just infuriating to watch the man work. And so he made Jackass of the Year award. It's the first time I've given it out, and he's the first person I've ever deemed deserving of it. And to see him go, I'm not shocked. When it happened, I was sitting at work, I saw the text, and I literally did the Breakfast Club, just quiet fist in the air, and just slowly walked around the office.
Haven't seen it.
Of course you haven't seen the Breakfast Club. Oh, what a loser. Just the Judd Nelson fist in the air, just quietly walk around the office, just feeling vindicated. I mean, his career here with the Bills ends with these inglorious statistics. 26th in first downs per game. 22nd in points per game at 18.9. 29th in total offense. 29th in yards per game at 302.6. 29th in yards per play at 4.8 yards. 30th in time of possession, 28 minutes and 20 seconds per game on average. Your rushing attack, I mean, we were the last ranked passing offense, and our rushing attack, which was number 1, dropped all the way to number 6.
Do you want my head to explode? In the name of all that is good and decent, no more for today!
Fine. But Jesus Christ, Rick, what did you do? What did you do? I'm going to give all of you out there a moment of silence to process all that, or to go find a bathroom in case listening to all that made you physically ill. Now, I understand. There are people out there who wanted to claim that all of the struggles of the offense belonged on Tyrod Taylor's doorstep. I've made no mistake in my criticism this season of Tyrod Taylor that I don't believe he's a starting caliber quarterback.
You can't convince me that a quarterback that averages a touchdown and 160 passing is something to cheer about.
Okay.
I don't want that.
But you also can't convince me that that's absolutely just his fault. You can't convince me that it's just the quarterback's fault. And Brandon Beane hit on that in his press conference, which is why I pretty much knew right then and there when he said that there was more hands involved in the offensive struggles of this football team than just Tyrod Taylor. I knew Dennison would be fired. I knew it. Knew it in my bones.
Yeah, he didn't give him a vote of confidence at all.
No. Now, I pledged to pay for Rick's U-Haul, but no one from One Bills Drive has responded to my email as of today. So the least I can do is cheers you on your way out the door, sir. Good luck to you, and may I leave you with this age-old proverb. Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you.
You're the worst thing that ever happened in America. Seriously, it goes you, slavery, and then Pearl Harbor and 9/11 combined.
A lot of things are going to happen between now and kickoff of 2018. But I promise you, between our picks in the draft, our cap space, and just the restructuring of this coaching staff, it can't get worse on offense than what we've already experienced. I will bet a Seagram's and my left testicle on it. And that, folks, brings 2017 to a close and officially begins our 2018 offseason primer. We've got a ton of stuff to talk about. We're going to give you an overview of what we're looking forward to over the next couple of weeks coming up in the offseason. But we have to start with our new offensive coordinator, former Alabama Crimson Tide coordinator, Brian Daboll. The Bills front office, I just want to say this, they are the worst in terms of podcasting. I mean, Chris, how many times this season have I given you a rundown and the Bills will make a move the day of the rundown? The day that I've made it, we're 10 minutes to 15 minutes before we go on, the Bills will announce moves or things are happening. And now I have to drastically alter the show.
It's every Tuesday because every Tuesday is an off day, and Tuesdays are when they bring in players to work out, try out, cut people from the practice squad, and so forth.
I mean, I'm mad how quickly the offensive coordinator hire came in. I really am. We moved our podcast to Monday in hopes of getting out in front of any hire. Because I wanted to do, pros, cons. I mean, Chris, if Chris looks at our rundown right now, he can tell you I've got a pros and cons list on probably 6 or 7 different candidates. It took me hours to compile this nonsense. And ultimately, it didn't matter. None of it was Oh, guys, Bean, you suck. We moved our show to tonight in order to hopefully get out in front of any hire, and they still beat us to the punch. I mean, it's incredible. And it's frustrating how efficient our front office has been. Not just with this hire, but throughout the course of the season when it comes to making moves. Now, taking a look at Daboll and the tail of the tape on him, just trying to get a feel for who he is as an offensive coordinator. I can imagine when the news broke that he was hired, there was a lot of Bills fans out there who were just kind of shrugging their shoulders, going, who the hell is this guy? A lot of people are going to spend the next few weeks, whether it's WGR, whether it's the guys over at Bills Wire, whatever outlet you subscribe to, that are going to throw a lot of facts and figures at you regarding his tenure, previous teams, discussing whether they think he's going to be better, whether it'll be worse than Dennison. I'm not going to waste too much of your time with that. I mean, really what I want to do is I want to talk about a handful of things that stuck out to me about him and how the Bills are going to look philosophically different in 2018 on the offensive side of the ball. Okay? It starts off with NFL experience. Now, one of the stark contrasts to Rick Dennison I see right out of the gate. When you look at the offensive coordinators who were available ranked by experience.
They don't get no better than Darrell Bevell.
Darrell Bevell is at the top of the list, and Daboll's nowhere near it. He has only 3 seasons of NFL experience as a coordinator. Well, 4 as a coordinator. And it's been 7 years since he last held the title. Well, I guess 6. 6, technically. You compare that to Darrell Bevell's 11 years or Mike Shula's 9 years. We're talking about, and even Rick Dennison. Rick Dennison was a 10-year veteran play caller. I think the lesson from last season that we learned with Rick Dennison is that experience doesn't always indicate that you're going to do a good job. I mean, you look at what Dennison was able to create, and then what you watch a first-time head coach and 3-year offensive coordinator in Sean McVay. And you take a look at what he was able to do for the Rams and for the Redskins over the last few years. The youngest head coach in NFL history. And his offense was fun. It was creative. It was a lot of fun to watch on Sundays.
Well, in the handful of times that I watched the Los Angeles Rams games, it seemed like when they were on defense, McVay was on the sideline talking with your offensive coordinator and the whole offense.
Well, he was the offensive coordinator.
About what to do on the next drive, and basically left Wade Phillips to technically be the head coach, so to speak, on all defensive drives. It didn't seem like he was too engaged when the defense was on the field. It's a trust that you have with your DC to let him do what he does. Because we know McVay didn't know anything about coaching defense.
And so the point and the reason I bring him up, I'm not trying to say that Daboll's going to be McVay. That's not it at all. What I'm trying to say, though, is pointing out that for all the value that experience has. I mean, that's what I told my father. My father called me, and over the course of 5 minutes, he answered the phone, and the first thing out of his mouth wasn't hi, not how you doing. It was, okay, I've got a rebuttal to your stance on Dennison. I said, okay, Dad, let me hear it because I'm going to debunk it within 4 minutes. 3 minutes and 47 seconds later, my father was saying, okay, well, when you explain to me how Rick Dennison sucks like that, I guess I see your point. You're damn right. Essentially, Rick Dennison was hired because Sean McDermott's a first-time head coach. And, like you just touched on, like with McVay, he needs people who are experienced that he can defer to.
I believe Wade Phillips was coaching in the NFL before McVay was born.
The problem with Dennison is that the guy you're deferring to in Dennison just made poor decisions. He was overly conservative when he didn't need to be. There was no creativity or aggression to him. And I think in a lot of cases, like, everyone wants to bag on McDermott for punting on 4th down. I think you see an experienced coordinator who instilled no faith in the offense to move the football in their head coach. So what you saw was a lot of punts and opportunities when they could have moved the ball because he simply didn't trust him. What I'm saying is that sometimes experience doesn't get you results. Sometimes you're experienced just because you've been around longer. It doesn't mean you're necessarily better. So his inexperience shouldn't really be held against him.
I was going to say that kind of goes with Jeff Fisher as a head coach.
Jesus. If Jeff Fisher finds another job, Seagram's bet. Chris, Jeff Fisher finds another job in football.
No, he won't.
True or false?
No.
All right, I bet you he will.
This a head coaching.
No. But he will work again in football.
That I could see. A head coach. Head coach, absolutely not.
Another notion that I kind of want to touch on when it comes to Brian Daboll. This notion that exists out there that he was a failure as an offensive coordinator. Obviously, whenever you hire somebody, you look back at their history because that's kind of an indicator. I mean, it doesn't tell you, okay, this is who he is, because obviously players can change from one scheme to another, from one team to another. I mean, look at Micah Hyde. Micah Hyde wasn't a Pro Bowl safety with the Green Bay Packers, but he's here now and he's made it. Things can change based from situation to situation, but it kind of gives you a frame of reference as far as where is this guy coming from. And while people grow and change, it can set an expectation level. In his first job with the Browns, Daboll's offenses, they struggled. I'll give you that. They ranked 32nd and 29th in the NFL in total offense. The following season, he joined Tony Sparano in Miami, and he took their 30th ranked offense and bumped them all the way up to 20th. That's an improvement, but it's not exactly earth-shattering. You weren't great. You were just better than shit. And then in his final stint in 2012 as an offensive coordinator with the Kansas City Chiefs, he was once again 32nd in the NFL in offensive production. So on the surface, that might appear to be cause for concern. But just looking at the rankings, you got to dig a little bit deeper than that. In his first year with the Browns, he had the last place offense in football, but he was 8th in rushing yards. In fact, 4 seasons as an offensive coordinator, 3 times he fielded top 10 rushing attacks and was top 6 or higher in each of those 3 seasons. So how does a team that successful on the ground just completely fail to find any success through the air? Let me run you through the wide receiver names. I'm going to read these off to you. And each one of those seasons, when he had these great rushing offenses, these were his wide receivers. In 2009, it was with the Browns, it was Braylon Edwards, Muhammad Massaquoi, and Josh Cribbs, who was more of a kick returner than he was a wide receiver. In 2010, it was the same group, except without Braylon Edwards, and tight end Robert Royal was the guy. You guys remember Robert Royal? Yeah, that guy. And then in 2012, the only 2 names of note that the Kansas City Chiefs had on the roster were Dwayne Bowe and Steve Breston.
When did they have that season where they didn't throw a touchdown pass to the wide receiver?
That was just a couple years ago with Alex Smith. He was...
Is that like 2014 or 15?
14 or 15, I want to say. So those are the wide receivers that he had at his disposal in the 3 seasons that his passing offenses were ranked 29th or lower. And then you take a look at who's under center, and it gets even uglier. I'm going to name you the quarterbacks that have played for Brian Daboll. Brady Quinn, Derek Anderson, Colt McCoy, Jake Delhomme, a past his prime Jake Delhomme, Seneca Wallace, Chad Henne, Matt Moore, Matt Castle, and Brady Quinn, again, on a different team in a different jersey. That is the list of quarterbacks that Daboll has had the misfortune of coaching over his tenure as an offensive coordinator. I mean, he must have done something really shitty in a previous life to deserve that. I mean, Brady Quinn twice? That's... I've seen people who committed vehicular manslaughter sentenced to less, okay? Sentenced to less than Brady Quinn twice on two separate teams. How is anybody supposed to craft a worthwhile offense with that kind of a cast? I mean, Chris, who's going to get production out of that group?
Well, you should get, if you're in Cleveland, you shouldn't get production anywhere, ever. I mean, I read something today that I'm from Yahoo Sports. Daboll wanted to go to Tua like in October.
Well, every offensive coordinator wants a quarterback that can throw the ball accurately.
Well, that's what they had a story on Yahoo today that he wanted to go to Tua this year in like by the end of October. So because he thought he could get more out of his offense with him, and then Saban put the kibosh on that.
So speaking of Alabama, I mean, when you look back at those quarterbacks, I'd argue that that has to be taken into consideration when you look at his awful numbers as an offensive coordinator early on in his career. Now, one of the things you're going to hear a lot about is Alabama, and rightfully so. I mean, everyone's going to say, hey, his philosophy fit Alabama's program. I thought that too, considering how the running game did what the running game always seems to in Alabama. But the reality is that during the season last year, he managed to be pretty flexible in his play calling. Our offensive line for Alabama had we had injuries, guys missing games here and there. He often, his go-to is always going to be the power run. That power running is it's a staple of Crimson Tide football under Nick Saban. And it's the type of personnel that they accumulate. But at the same time, he's kind of flexed in and out of that based on the skill sets of the offensive linemen and running backs. He would mix in wrinkles of zone blocking schemes when the personnel dictated it. What he had at his disposal. He found a way to work with it. And then, while he backed away from a lot of the horizontal passing and the screen passing that Lane Kiffin did a lot of when he was there as an offensive coordinator, he still mixed it in occasionally, even though it wasn't his bread and butter. He still did it just to keep defensive coordinators off balance. Now that is something that stands out to me. One of the most infuriating things last year, outside of the lack of creativity on offense, was watching Dennison just staunchly refuse to call plays to the strength of his line, his running back, his quarterback, or his wide receivers. I mean, you watch him, he had this system in mind, and he was dead set on, I'm going to call plays that I think need to be called, regardless of whether I have the talent at these positions to pull it off, which ultimately isn't going to get you anywhere in the NFL. It's not. It was infuriating to watch on a week in and week out basis. It made our team toothless, and our attack was mostly ineffective. We relied a lot on our defense to keep us in football games. Seeing that Daboll has some flexibility and adaptability to his play calling and game planning is absolutely a positive. And, okay, so statistics. It's been so long since Daboll's coached at the NFL level. What I did was I went back and looked at his most recent season with Alabama, just to try to get some clues to what I can expect from him as an offensive coordinator. And I found a few things that I think might give some ideas about it, how his attack is built when he has the personnel to achieve it. This past season, the Crimson Tide was 19th in rushing attempts and 10th in rushing yards in D1 football, which makes sense considering that's the Saban philosophy. You run effectively, play hard-nosed defense. You do those two things and you pass mediocrely, you can win a lot of football games.
Yeah, you should be able to with freaking Bo Scarborough.
One of the knocks on Daboll was the lack of production in the passing attack and the lack of development of quarterback Jalen Hurts. Now, Hurts was a freshman last year and took his team to the national title game and lost on the final drive of the game. Coming into this season, there was a lot of talk in the offseason by the Crimson Tide, by the coaching staff, by Hurts himself, about how in his sophomore year, he's going to become a better passer. I'm going to develop as a passer. Because essentially he's been relying on his legs more. That's what makes him more of a weapon, not so much his arm. The results weren't great as far as production from the pocket. The Tide finished 89th in passing yards and 111th in passing attempts. Now that's interesting to me. Now, it's possible that both of these things are a product of Alabama nursing large leads in the second half or in the fourth quarter of some games. So they don't feel compelled to throw the ball the way they maybe would if they were down or if a game was close.
That sounds like how you guys lost to Auburn.
Yeah.
You're so bad in passing that you rely so much on the run.
Then if you take it away.
Auburn was able to take that away.
Well, and that's exactly what Georgia did for the first half of the national title game. I mean, it's concerning that in what was supposed to be a year where their quarterback took a step forward, they regressed from the previous season through the air. And for a team in Buffalo whose struggles in second half scoring have been well documented, Alabama was 83rd in NCAA football in fourth quarter scoring. Okay, now again, you could point to the fact, well, they were already winning by 60 come the fourth quarter. So they were just trying to run the clock out. Maybe. But I don't like to see that team can't put up more points for as talented as they are with that kind of, with Daboll's play calling. But to your point, you got to look at the national title game. Take that as an example. In the first half, Jalen Hurts went 3 of 8 passing for just 21 yards. He was missing wide receivers. He was missing them. He was throwing too deep. He was throwing over their heads. He was throwing at their feet. He was every way you can imagine that you don't complete a pass, Jalen Hurts found a way to do it.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts, he couldn't hit sand if he fell off a camel.
It was brutal. And at the same time, 6 carries for 47 yards. He was literally Blake Bortles in that game. Blake Bortles. He ran for more yards than he was passing in that first half. Daboll ran with him on designed runs from the shotgun and from under center. And he used those runs to the outside to make the linebackers a little bit tentative about just coming downhill on the running game. I mean, ultimately in the first half, the game plan that they put together was not working. Okay? In the second half, the staff made the decision to pull Hurts from the game and insert true freshman Tua Tagovailoa. Now, Daboll wanted him earlier in the season to start because he knew he was a more accurate passer.
He's got a cannon attached to his torso.
Immediately, the play calling changed. The game plan changed from one that focused on running the ball, both with the quarterback and running backs, and then just trying to generate something off play action, to one that was attacking down the field and using the passing attack to set up the run. Something that you don't see out of an Alabama offense.
That's something I don't see out of an Alabama offense if it's A.J. McCarron or Greg McElroy as a quarterback. Tua is the best quarterback they've had under Saban.
Well, flat out. He's the only 5-star recruit Saban's ever had during his tenure. The result of that change in philosophy was a passing attack that went on to score 3 touchdowns through the air on passes of 7 yards, 6 yards, and 41 yards. They were aggressive, taking shots down the field, trying to hit guys in the seam, comeback routes, crossing routes, challenging the safeties and the linebackers. I mean, you saw their playbook open up tenfold from where it was in the first half. All because he had a better passer under center. Now, when they needed that fourth quarter scoring, it was there, and it kept him in the game and ultimately won him the national title. What I like is that when you look at that, as an offensive coordinator, you have a guy who came into a game plan with a starter, had a game plan set, game plan failed, quarterback failed. You make a switch to a more talented athlete, a more talented passer with his shoulder. I mean, Jalen Hurts was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year, even though he wasn't a good thrower. I credit Daboll with some of that because you put your quarterback who can't throw the ball in positions to still play, move the ball with your feet. Play action. We're going to set you up to get wide open receivers that you can hit in stride. He drastically changed his play calling in the middle of a football game, and it resulted in a victory. Dennison has no ability to do that, and it got us crucified in the second half of games. So to see a guy who can do that on the fly and just completely flip his play calling and find success, that's what's important. So, Chris, where do you fall on this?
I mean, you could go to the national title game. Like, even you just look at the game-winning touchdown that they had, that like fly route down the side.
Aggressive call on second and long. Just call all go routes.
Even if you look at Tua actually even I knew this. Looked off the safety, held him in the middle of the field, and had a window and just threw a bullet down the field. Now, I don't think he'd make that play call with Jalen Hurts in the game.
Absolutely not. And that's my point, is he's a guy who very much seems to structure his play calling to the talent of his team.
Daboll was able to open up more play calls in the passing game with Tua in there.
Yep.
Is what it comes down to.
And so, at the end of the day, just to kind of wrap this all up and put a bow on it, make no mistake, Daboll is still a run-first offensive coordinator. I mean, you watch what Alabama's done over the last few years. He's going to bring back the pin-and-pull rushing attack that Greg Roman and Anthony Lynn used to make us the number 1 rushing team in football. It's a sight for sore eyes. I've missed it. We did it a little bit here and there this season, and it got results, but Dennison didn't like it, so Dennison didn't call it. It was horseshit. It hamstrung our offense. Not only do his career stats outline his run-first mentality, but in an interesting wrinkle, according to Eric Turner over at Cover1.net last season, Daboll called more zone read running plays than actual pure rushes, especially on early downs. It essentially made the quarterback a weapon in the rushing attack, which, look at Jalen Hurts. He's not a good thrower, but he was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. You don't do that if you're an inaccurate quarterback without help from your offensive coordinator. And his ability to change the game plan on the fly, as we discussed, was evident. I mean, it just looked like a different offense completely in the second half. But he really only had a half hour to throw that attack together. And everything that he was doing was just on the fly. So for people who hated watching our offense consistently get bogged down in the second half of games, this gives you a glimmer of hope that, hey, look, here's a guy who can adjust a game plan. Right or wrong, he can at least make changes, try to do things differently. But his hire doesn't come without some question marks. I mean, first and foremost, how does this sort of mindset, when it comes to an attack, affect what direction we take with the quarterback position?
See, I'd like to know what the interview process was like when it came to that. Because it's not like you bring in a whole new coaching staff and GM. They've already been here. So they need a new offensive coordinator. I think if I was Brian Daboll, my first thing would have been like, what are we doing at quarterback?
Absolutely.
If you want me here at OC, I need to know what you were doing at quarterback.
Well, is
it going to be Tyrod? Are we going to the draft? Are we going to make a trade for Alex Smith? Are we going to try and sign Kirk Cousins?
The fact that he left the job at Alabama making $1.2 million a year as a coordinator, that's a lot of money for an offensive coordinator anywhere. Even in the NFL, that's a lot of money for an offensive coordinator. And he was playing in college with a 5-star rookie under him. Now, I get it. It's the big show. Everybody wants to come work in the NFL. When you get your opportunities, you don't want to let them go. So I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. But I also think that part of the conversation was he needed to come here and find out if Bean had a plan at what he was going to do with quarterback. Now, the question for me is, with this change at offensive coordinator and his difference in philosophy, offensive experiences with running quarterbacks, with pocket passing quarterbacks, does that mean... I mean, you think about quarterbacks in the draft. Everyone's obsessed with this idea of trading up in the draft to get a quarterback. Okay? Does a guy who's used to game planning around running quarterbacks and quarterbacks with a lot of athleticism, does that mean that... Now, I've widely dismissed the idea of Lamar Jackson being in play for the Buffalo Bills in the first or second round simply because with all of his athleticism, he isn't known for his accuracy, which means his pocket passing will never be great. But with the change at offensive coordinator, does that mean that a player like him could become it? Does that mean there's maybe a philosophy shift as far as what we do to address that quarterback position?
I don't want Lamar Jackson anywhere near my football team.
I'm telling you, this is a question that you have to ask. Does his ability to game plan for athletic quarterbacks open up the door to something like this? You know, if you were a Rick Dennison offense, you'd say, okay, I need a pure pocket passer to run this offense. Now you've got this other offense coming out, the one that Tyrod, think about it, with Tyrod under center, even with his limited skill set, we were still we were a top 10 offense last year. This happens because you've got a guy who can scheme up a way to get points on the board and move the football, both through the air and on the ground. So does his presence open up more options at the quarterback position? And then, how does it affect the performance and makeup of the offensive line? You think about it. The regression of our rushing attack under Dennison got a lot of the press in 2017, and our right tackle and right guard spots were exposed for the lack of consistency.
That's what I put on for last week with the superlatives. I said, like, the LVP was whoever was at right tackle.
Well, so think about this. A switch back to the same, back to a familiar sort of rushing attack could help shore up some of those spots in the line just by design and function alone. But what happens with Deion Dawkins? He thrived in Dennison's zone blocking scheme. The question is, will he be able to perform at the same level in a new scheme? And to take that idea, just a lot of chatter, everything, people have been discussing about trading away Cody Glenn to obtain more draft capital, to get cap space, to go sign a free agent quarterback. If you're moving from a new scheme, and this is a rookie who thrived in one system, who's to say? Offensive line is such a technical thing to try to play. Who's to say that Deion Dawkins has the same success at left tackle in a different scheme than he did under Rick Dennison? And are you willing to bet that he will and trade away a guy who's proven he can do it? When if you're wrong, the consequences for that would be devastating.
Or what if Deion Dawkins is still good in this new offense, except at guard?
Well, and this is my point. You're threatening the makeup of your line with this philosophy shift. Going back, you stand to gain. Guys like Ryan Groy, guys like John Miller may be back in play for, guard play and for maybe even a right tackle spot. But Deion Dawkins was he was your diamond in the rough this season. He was the thing you hung your hat on at the end of this year. You said, look, at least we found this young guy. He's not on a big contract for a while, and he's been a pretty good left tackle for us. Well, now you're changing schemes, and if you trade away Cody Glenn and you find out that he can't play up to that level in the new kind of blocking scheme, you're in a lot of trouble. That's going to be something that fans have to be looking at. And then, has Daboll learned enough since his last stint as an offensive coordinator that with some talent upgrades, he can fix our last place passing offense? when in reality, his best work comes on the ground. I mean, everyone has praised him. Former Alabama players. Jake Delhomme said, listen, Daboll, he's a great teacher. You know, he understands the X's and O's. He communicates really well. That's his strength as a coach. Does he have the ability to take that and use it to mentor a young quarterback and foster their success? I mean, think about it. His first stint as an offensive coordinator, he had Brady Quinn, a young Brady Quinn, and he couldn't coach Brady Quinn into being a winner. So the question is, with a young quarterback, because I'm assuming we're going to be obtaining one through the draft, through free agency, there's going to be something's going to happen here with our quarterback position. Does he have it in him to foster growth in that individual? That's a big question.
Well, no, I mean, you got to also throw in a receiving core. I mean, how bad of a rookie year did Zay Jones have?
Well, it's hard to catch balls when they're not actually thrown.
Yeah, well, there's that
thrown
too.
Around you.
There's that too, but he's had to, like there's the play in the Carolina game where he could have had that for the game-winning touchdown.
It wasn't game when it would have put us in field goal range, but it wouldn't have.
I thought it was I could have sworn it was at the goal line.
Nope, it was at like the 10-yard line.
All right, we'll fight about that later. But I want to see what he can do with, you know, the passing game as a whole. I mean, yeah, you got to coach the quarterback, you also got to coach the receivers.
And I just look at it in terms of he's never been good at coaching a passing offense. Then again, you look at what he did in the second half.
That's why Calvin Ridley's a sack of shit.
But you look at what he did in that second half of the Tide game, and you say, okay, well maybe he's figured some things out along the way. That's going to be the other question mark: is can he figure out how to be an adequate coach when it comes to calling an offensive game plan for passing? Can he figure out a way to get it done? I mean, at the end of the day, I don't mind the hire, considering that we're an offense that's best suited to be a run-first attack. We are. The Buffalo Bills have been a run-first offense forever. I mean, even when we had the K-gun offense, Jim Kelly was in his prime, that K-gun offense is only as devastating as it was because you had Thurman Thomas running the ball when teams tried too hard to sell out for the pass.
Yeah, I want to say he led the league in yards from scrimmage 2 years in a row.
It's incredible. So we have been at our best when we can run the ball effectively. That's just the bread and butter of Buffalo Bills football. I think that he's going to do well to getting us back on track for that. But all of these questions are going to have to be answered. And it's going to dictate whether or not we as a franchise take that next step forward towards fielding a unit week in and week out that consistently competes, whether you're at home, whether you're on the road, and on both sides of the ball.
Well, it comes down to what I said earlier about the Saints, because they hit on Kamara, Marcus Williams, and Marcus Lattimore in the draft. And now they have to pay him, rookie wage scale so that they don't hurt your cap. And you have these three great players at a low wage for a couple of seasons, and we got a hit on the draft.
Well, and to your point, it's going to be interesting to see how Daboll and Bean collaborate together to put together the 2018 draft board. I mean, we're flush with draft capital. We have tons of options. In our upcoming shows, we're going to be breaking down some of these most logical positions that the Bills are going to be drafting at and overviewing a lot of the possible candidates. I mean, you break it down like this. Quarterback, that's a given. The Bills have tried everything over the last few years to address the quarterback position. Free agency, the draft, undrafted free agents. Nothing has worked to this point. Now Bean has to try and find a candidate to pick up the mantle of quote-unquote franchise quarterback for the first time since Jim Kelly. I mean, good luck to you. Hopefully it pans out for your sake and mine. Then you look at some of the other places during the draft, things that are deep that we obviously have a need. Linebacker. Everybody who watches the Bills this season realizes that we were severely limited on defense by the range, athleticism, and skill set of our linebackers.
And we could have covered all that had we drafted Reuben Foster.
Reuben Joint Rollin' Foster. I don't know what it is. These guys from Alabama smoking weed. I don't understand it. Stop it. Put the pipe down. You know what the problem is, and I said this to Spencer German from Rock Sports Network. And he and I were talking about it over the weekend, and I made a comment about how the problem with them is that because he was like, another Alabama player caught for smoking pot in the NFL. He's like, how many does that make now? And I said, you know what the problem is that when they go to college, they get away with it all the time because they have the Chris Carter fall guy quote unquote. You see it. Hootie Jones, one of our starting safeties at the start of this season, and I think our starting left tackle, were caught in a car with a firearm and drugs. But guess what? There was a third guy in the car, and the drugs and guns were conveniently his and not the players. So they escaped without any. It's incredible to me how these guys can't stay out of trouble. I mean, look at Rolando McClain. All the tail in the world. He burned his own friggin' house down. Oh, Jesus. But in any event, the linebacker position absolutely should be a concern of the Buffalo Bills heading into the offseason. This draft is deep at the linebacker position. There's guys that you are going to get on day 2 and maybe even, I'd say day 3, who could come in and eventually start for you, kind of like Milano did for us. You're going to find quality linebacking talent. That's going to be a thing that we're going to talk about this offseason. Defensive tackle is another area of just massive need, but they're plentiful in this draft. As long as we don't trade away all of our draft capital in pursuit of a quarterback, we should be able to land a DT who's capable of just changing the face of the defense. It's a dirty job, but I think that there's a lot of big-bodied guys in this draft who can, if they're not standouts, they can at least come in and help out.
Yeah, you're gonna need to find somebody to replace Kyle Williams. We don't know if he'll be back. We don't know his situation. You just got to wait and see on that.
And then you talk about the offensive line. There isn't an offensive lineman in the draft that the Bills, in my opinion, can draft and plug in as a starter. That's my just my overview of it.
That's why when we get to cover that this offseason, we're going to have on a professional that knows offensive linemen and will tell us there are linemen in the draft you can have that you can plug in and play.
Now, having said that, though, when I look at it, offensive lines are getting worse. And year after year, it's getting harder and harder to find blue-chip offensive linemen. Like, that's the reality of it. So more often than not, you're better off going through free agency. So that's going to be the next step in our offseason process here over the next few weeks. Free agency. There are no magic fixes to our deep longing along the offensive line in this year's draft. I, Chris, firmly believe that there is no starting right tackle that the Bills are going to, given our needs at other positions, that we could take in the, third round or fourth round, who are going to be a reliable option as a starter. I just don't think there are. So that leaves us free agency. Now, as of today, the Bills have $31.6 million in cap space. And if Tyrod Taylor were to be released, we could have as much as $42.7 at our disposal. Now,
my question to you would be, what is that, assuming we used all of our picks?
I mean, the rookie wage, the pool doesn't affect the number that much.
So like $1 million, probably.
Yeah, we'll call it $1 million. So ultimately, over the next few weeks, we're going to be discussing, we're going to have different guests on, breaking down salary cap implications, especially as the season comes to an end and it really starts to clarify as far as what players are going to get franchise tagged, what players are going to be, who's getting kept around, who's not being re-signed, who's not being franchised, who's going to hit the market.
And who's being brought in on a draft visit.
Exactly. And that's, but the positions, again, that I'm looking at free agency, offensive line, linebacker, running back, and wide receiver are probably the 4 positions that I think in free agency are probably going to be where the Bills look the most.
We definitely need a running back. Nobody wants to see Mike Tolbert anywhere near the 53 next year.
I mean, in terms of free agency, though, you got to be careful because, you think about what the Rams did this year. We have an extra second-round pick because the Rams traded us for Sammy Watkins. Now there's word on the street that he could be franchise tagged. Are you crazy? I sent out a tweet last week outlining the fact that the Rams currently have, I think it's $19 million, just north of $19 million already wrapped up in their wide receiver position. And they just drafted 2 rookies in Cooper Kupp and the kid from Texas A&M, Josh Reynolds. So when you take a look at that, now they're talking about franchise tagging Sammy Watkins. Even if he were to sign a long-term deal, say $7 or $8 million, let's say he doesn't break the bank, he doesn't do the 1 year, $16 million, and instead he does a $7 or $8 million contract, you'd still be tying up 18 to 20% of your team's cap, all of your cap, in one position at wide receiver. That's absurd to me. How can you justify that? As a football team, how can you justify you just paid Robert Woods $8 million? You paid Tavon Austin. I have no doubt that if they go after Sammy, Tavon Austin gets cut. But even then, you're only saving $2 or $3 million on your cap. This is, when it comes to free agency, folks, this is why it's so important. Teams do things that absolutely fuck them over 5 years later. And they don't realize it until it happens. I mean, case in point, there's been a handful of moves over my lifetime as like a knowledgeable Bills fan or just fan of football that I've seen a move. It's not our team. It's another fan base. And I see it and they're excited about a move that they made. And I look at it and I say, oh, that is going to come back and bite you in the ass. And it has. First and foremost, the Jarius Byrd contract signing for the Saints. They were a team that was already up against the cap.
And they had to trade Jimmy Graham.
They essentially had to get rid of Jimmy Graham and sell their defense off for spare parts because they needed the cap relief. So you watch what shit their team turned into. Well, that's because of I blame Jarius Byrd for that. I look at the Miami Dolphins. You've got a good young defensive end in Olivier Vernon. You drafted him, you coached him up. Now he's a free agent. But the year before he hit free agency, you went out and you signed Mario Williams to a 2-year, $18 million contract. You're paying him $9 million a season. Because you signed a Mario Williams, you can't afford your own homegrown rookie. And he leaves you in free agency. And then guess what happens? Mario Williams turns into Mario Williams and just quits on you. Absolutely, wholly and completely. And it screws you over in the aspect that you lost a talented young player at a premier position in football simply because you signed an aging veteran instead. Free agency has the ability to make or break a franchise. I mean, the Bills played last offseason smart. We came away with 2 safeties for about $4 million a year per man. And it's looking like a steal right now for us because I'd argue that we have the 2 most talented safeties in our division right now. So you can do free agency smart. You can do free agency dumb. The ramifications are long-term for both. And the thing I like is hearing from Brandon Beane this mantra of responsible spending. He wants to spend, but he wants to spend responsibly. I like that. Doug Whaley got knocked because he led the league as far as when you looked at the Bills roster, we had a roster that over his tenure that was more free agent picks and signings than it was draft picks. That's a problem. Because you can't, in a salary cap driven league, when you're not paying a franchise quarterback, there's no way in hell you should be in cap trouble. But that's where the Bills were. Brandon Beane was with the Carolina Panthers through all those years. He watched the previous GM get fired for screwing up their cap situation. He watched Dave Gettleman come in and fix it, make the team competitive, get to a Super Bowl, only to be ousted, and now that same guy who screwed everything up is back there. And he's re-signing guys to big extensions. I think he's learned through those experiences what to do and what not to do through free agency.
You got to figure out what positions that you want to put your money in. Obviously, number 1 quarterback. You want to have. I don't think there's any limit in the cap to putting however much money you want towards a quarterback. But it's like other positions. You had that piece of, maybe, I think it might have been during our bye week about, Marcel Darius' $100 million contract and how defensive tackles will never live up to their contract.
You can't. It's not possible for you to make enough of an impact on a game-by-game basis to warrant $100 million at D tackle. You just can't do it. So, knowing that, it'll be interesting to see how this team, how Beane in his first, because he's a rookie GM, how he attacks this offseason in this free agency period.
Yeah, this is his first free agency as a GM and draft.
Guys, this offseason, I'm not going to lie to you. This is an offseason that I'm excited about for the first time in a long, long time. I am genuinely amped to see what this team does. We're flush with draft capital. We have cap space. We have the ability to get more cap space if we so choose. It's all there for the taking. Now it's just on our GM to do it. Our GM and the coaching staff to get together and make the right moves that make this team more consistently competitive. I mean, it's going to be incredible to watch. And on a week-by-week basis, we're going to be bringing you guys coverage, analysis on everything, the draft, on free agency, so make sure you stick around. Also, make sure you're following Rock Sports Network on Facebook and social media. I'm going to be joining Ryan Lasel and Icy Vic from the Huddle TV show on Saturday, January 27th. where we'll be recapping the 2017 season live from 34 Rush over at the Batavia Downs Casino. You can tune in live on Facebook, or, if you want to interact with us, ask questions, we'll do a little Q&A. Or catch the broadcast on My 18 TV, WBGT TV, serving the Batavia, Rochester, and Syracuse area. And make sure you check back with our podcast over the next few weeks. We're going to be firing up, like I said, free agency and draft primers.
We're going over every position in the draft. We're going to have different guests on each week to bring you all the knowledge you need to know about each position in the draft and what it relates to the Buffalo Bills, and how they fit in with the Bills defense, how they fit in with the Bills offense. And we're gonna bring you the best quarterback coverage we can bring you because you can't trust Drew, who has loved Ryan Mallett and Landry Jones.
I thought both of them were going to be the absolute truth. So you're right. I don't trust myself to scout a quarterback worth a damn. Guys, talented speakers, some of the sharpest football minds in podcasting, and plenty of beer reviews. You've got to check back over the course of the offseason because we're still going to be here, folks. Guys, we got to get out of here. Thank you so much for checking in. I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger, and this has been the Rockpile Report.